Welcome. We'll get started shortly. Before we begin, here's how to earn continuing professional education credit for attending this session. There are no polling questions or attendance checks. Instead, you will demonstrate your knowledge by taking a brief multiple-choice quiz using the Earmark app. Visit earmark.app in your web browser. You can also download the mobile app by scanning the QR code on the screen. Log in, or if you're new, create your free account. Be sure to use a valid email address because that's where we'll send your course completion certificates. From the home screen, scroll down to find the course. You can also tap the magnifying glass icon to search for the course. Tap on the course artwork, then the Enroll button. On the Course tab, you'll find the recording and quiz questions. Complete the quiz to earn your CPE certificate. It takes us a few days to create the course on the app, so if you are attending this session live, please wait a few days. We'll email you a link to the course when it is ready. If you have questions or need help, email us at support@earmarkcpe.com. And now, on to the event.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us for this webinar on preventing accounts payable fraud and your internal financial controls for 2025. My name is Jonathan Kiritsis, and I will be your host. I'm from ApprovalMax. I've been working with financial executives for about the last 10 years. I've been representing ApprovalMax across 4 continents for events and webinars such as this to assist in companies in setting up their financial controls and ensuring they are risk-free from fraud. I'm joined today by Helena Patience, who is the CEO of EntreFlow. She's a CPA and CMA with over 15 years of experience in finance and HR within multinational companies. As the CEO of the group, she has worked with a team of over 20 finance and HR professionals to help SMEs get organized, grow, and crush their goals. She's a QuickBooks Elite Pro Advisor and a Silver Level 0 Advisor. She holds vast global experience after living and working in Australia, India, the UK, and Ireland. We are also joined by Janelle Fox. She's a finance and operations professional with 18 plus years of experience in financial management, operations, and technology. As a partner solutions engineer at Intuit, she empowers accounting firms with technology solutions to streamline their financial processes. Previously, she held leadership roles in nonprofit and public accounting. She enjoys family time and community service. Fantastic to hear. In terms of a quick agenda, we'll look at introducing financial controls and accounts payable fraud. We'll look at the types of accounts payable fraud that we're looking to prevent. We'll look at tips. At how we can detect this accounts payable fraud, and then tips on how we can prevent this accounts payable fraud in the future. We'll go over a couple of real-world examples that our panelists can share with us, and then finally we'll look at how Intuit and ApprovalMax can help you in the future. So getting right into it, we're going to look at understanding financial controls and accounts payable fraud. So I'd like to get Helena, in your opinion, on what do financial controls mean to you in the context of accounts payable fraud?
For sure. So your financial controls are really the structures that you have in place to essentially protect the organization's resources, assets from any kind of fraud or naughty behavior, to make sure that the company is protected, the assets are protected, and we're making it difficult for people to conduct theft, essentially. So there's lots of ways that people can do fraud, and we'll talk about a number of those today. But the financial controls are really the things that you put in place in order to prevent that as much as possible. It's never going to be 100%, but you want to do whatever you can to safeguard the organization as much as possible.
Yeah, I think that's a key point. It really is you have to take a holistic view on the risks that are there, and kind of work it from every angle you can in order to prevent this.
For sure.
Fantastic. So here we have the types of accounts payable fraud, and specifically the ones that we can help manage through Intuit and through ApprovalMax and the other apps that are available from their from their partner applications that are available. We're going to go over the main ones here over this slide and discuss some real world examples that our panelists have actually encountered. So just to give you guys a quick rundown on what these types are, we have billing fraud, which is really when an employee makes a payment to what looks like a legitimate recipient, but it's really a shell company or a personal purchase or something other than a legitimate business expense. I have a statistic here from a report that ran in 2024 that cites over 80% of organizations were victims of billing scheme attempts on their organizations. So this is really something that is not only historically been a problem across all markets globally, but is something that's going to continue to be a problem into 2025 and the years to come. Reimbursement fraud is when an employee claims expenses that are exaggerated, fake, personal in nature, or perhaps even submitted twice. This one can be tricky because, you have to watch out for what would be malicious intent and what could be just careless behavior on often what are non-finance individuals. Yeah, I think.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly. I was just being a little bit careless. Janelle, I believe you've got a quick example of what of reimbursement fraud.
Yes, I do. Many years ago, I was able to view or hear of a fellow employee who was going to conferences and staying at Disney World and submitting in hotels that would appear just to be travel for business or for conferences. But in fact, she was actually visiting Disney World on the company's dollars. And that individual was obviously escorted out after a period of time from the organization. But it was easy because it just said it was a hotel. And so no one really knew what was happening and how the benefits to her were happening. So that was an interesting one for sure.
Yeah, no, and hearing these stories, I mean, I do travel on behalf of ApprovalMax often, and just knowing that this happens always makes me a lot more careful with submitting these expenses, just so, I don't get put under the magnifying glass for these types of attempts. It is scary. It does happen often across organizations, and it's definitely something we have to keep in mind. No, thank you for that. So moving on, automated clearinghouse or ACH fraud is when someone redirects a legitimate payment to the wrong account. So this could be internal fraud by an employee or external fraud if someone submits an account update on behalf of a supplier. So this also kind of falls in line with those phishing attempts that we see. Helena, do you have an example of this type of ACH fraud?
I do. It was actually a combination of billing scheme and ACH, to be honest, with this case. So this was a contractor who worked for me, didn't do fraud while they were working for me, but were working for another firm at the same time. And I found out from that firm owner later on that this individual had been doing this. But he was responsible for the payments for their clients. And they were basically funneling cash to their own personal bank account. So there was some fake bills and also bills that were legitimate bills that were both going to their personal bank account. And one thing I'd like to highlight with this example is that this was a dad with 5 kids, like family man, really lovely person. His work was great. Like, you would have never expected that this type of person would have done this. So when I found out about this, I was absolutely surprised. We did some checks and didn't see anything that he had done on our end, but he was, he was going through a bit of a tough time with his wife. They were going through a separation, and what I've seen over the years from fraud perspective is that it's usually really good people that you'd never expect that just got into a bad situation, and they needed a quick fix to sort out a financial catastrophe for them. And it's not, it's never the people that you would expect, to be honest, that commit fraud. So it's just one thing to watch out for, because, a lot of people say, oh, that employee is really great, they'll never do anything like that, they're such honest people. And it just takes a really honest person in a bad situation to commit fraud.
I completely understand that. And I think it also comes down to having fraud as an option for them. Mm-hmm. If the financial controls were in place, perhaps, they wouldn't have gone in that direction. But just seeing potentially how easy it was for him to actually commit it, almost encouraged him to do so. So having those financial controls, again, safeguard the employees themselves for potentially committing such actions of fraud.
Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. So I think kind of leaning into that, then we have the phishing, which is when someone misrepresents themselves and tries to trick you into doing something you shouldn't. I think with the growth of AI, I mean, for decades, I've seen these phishing attempts via emails, but I've definitely seen them become a lot more professional and realistic over the last couple of years with the release of ChatGPT and these AI language models. It's no longer easy because you can tell by spelling mistakes or just, not the type of English you would expect, but it's really gotten a lot more professional seeing these phishing attempts. Do you have an example of this as well?
I do. I mean, you can imagine, because I own a CPA firm, we get phishing attempts thrown at us on a regular basis. And it's pretty easy for people to figure out our email addresses and send us attempts. I mean, oftentimes you'll see in the sent email address that it was fake, right? This one case that I have was, and I'd like to share it because it really scared us all because it was really clever. Basically, our client's email account was hacked in some way, shape, or form. We never got to the bottom of that. And this Fisher, I guess you could call them, had jumped into an email chain that we had already had with this client about a wire transfer that had to be sent. Now, we typically stay away from wire transfers because, there's just a lot of room for error, and we use third-party payment applications like Pluto or Bill.com or something like that to do the payments. But for this instance, they had a team that were traveling to a remote country, and we couldn't send payments that way. We had to do wire transfers. And so we were already we put some structures in place just to, we had ApprovalMax in place. We had some other structures in place to safeguard ourselves because it was going to be manually. Someone was going to have to go into the bank to send these wire transfers. So we had an email communication already about a wire transfer and some details on it and when it had to be sent and blah, 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 and the approval and all that sort of stuff. This hacker basically jumped onto that email chain and then sent an attachment for another wire that needed to be sent. And it was going to a completely different country. The description was a little bit odd. So they didn't do very good in that realm. Not that I want to give fishers like some tips on how to do a better fraud scheme here. But there was a couple of things that just kind of like were curious for us. And the email signature had a couple of weird changes to it from the original email signature that our client uses. So, we obviously had to go through our whole approval process, but through those steps, we were really concerned about this one. And because there was a couple of weird things that jumped out to us. We called our client and said, hey, what's this wire transfer about going to this other country? And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. He jumped into his email. So this email was sent from his email. The email was deleted on his end, so he had no record of that email sent.
Oh wow, they covered their tracks.
Yeah, they covered their tracks to the process, and so if we didn't have good processes in place, and my team wasn't intimately really familiar with what this client does and where they do their work, it would have been really easy for someone to go, okay, cool, we'll just send that other wire out, and it was like, it was $75,000 wire transfer. The other thing that's quite scary about these kinds of phishing issues is that if our team member had sent that out, our client would have had to basically trigger an insurance claim to get those funds back. And a lot of I had a big conversation with my insurance broker about this. A lot of there's a high incident of these phishing cases now. The insurance companies have actually skyrocketed their fees for this type of insurance, and most of them are capped at $200,000. $200,000 might sound like a lot of money for people, but you have this happen a couple of times throughout the year, potentially. I mean, we haven't had it luckily, but if you don't have good controls, it'd be very easy for this to happen, or very easy for a wire transfer to be over $200,000, depending on what that company is doing. Your insurance might not fully cover you, and you're also paying thousands of dollars for that insurance. So it's just one thing I like to flag to people, that our cybersecurity insurance premiums have gone up and the coverage has gone way down. So it's really important that you're clear about what your coverage is what you're actually getting covered for, and the limits, because it's just, another reason why you need to have something like ApprovalMax in place to cover yourself, because the insurance piece is quite underwhelming at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the trend we are seeing so far with the types of fraud, and the types we're going to cover in a little bit, is that having a few people involved in the process of actually approving these transactions definitely makes it significantly harder for these hackers, for these phishers, to actually gain control and successfully get your money. No, that's very interesting. And I mean, this is one of the more complicated ways that it's done is through hacking, through email hacking. But I'm sure a few people in the audience have heard that, at this time, people are using AI to generate voices and actually get the people's voices, as well as even AI videos to get people's faces on Zoom calls to get these hacking attempts over. So it really, the more people involved in the process, the more difficult it actually becomes for these phishers. So that's a great point you bring up, Helena. All right, moving on. Kickback fraud. This is where you start to get a little bit interesting. They're basically bribes where a supplier pays someone in the company to get preferential treatment. These kickbacks can be cash, gifts, freebies, and bribes can take many levels. From bribes to blackmail, so they can get very, very malicious in their attempts to actually to commit this type of fraud. One final example from your part, Helena, of kickback fraud?
For sure. I mean, this is very common, and I think it's really common at the purchaser's role within an organization. It might start off with small little things, but they could escalate. But I have an interesting example from a book that I read recently, actually, called the Surrender Experiment. It's a really fascinating book from a business standpoint. And in this book, they had someone who was responsible for, like, the company had grown. They had all these dealers that were selling their product, their software through their channels. And then they were going through the process of basically acquiring these dealers back to to centralize things. And one of their main acquisition leads, who was working on these arrangements to buy these dealerships back, was basically getting a massive kickback. And it was like millions and millions of dollars of kickbacks through these deals that he was dealing with these third-party dealers. And it goes into a lot more detail in the book, but essentially it led to like an 8-year court case, hundreds of millions of dollars of legal fees.
Wow.
And it almost tanked the business. Most of the leaders basically were out of a job. Like it really damaged the company significantly. And, just they trusted this person so much. I think this was the problem, that they trusted this person. They were such a good, worker. They did a great job. They were able to get these deals closed really quickly, but there was nobody really reviewing the agreements properly or making sure that there were other people involved in the whole process. Too much control was given to one person, and they were able to defraud quite a lot of folks through the process. So, and I guess I highlight this 8 years of legal battle and millions of dollars, because if they can be quite onerous, and the bigger damage to the company happened through the court cases after the fact, not through the initial fraud. The initial fraud was a far smaller amount, but they had to go and defend for many reasons the situation, and that ended up being the thing that caused a lot more of the damage. So your reputation damage and other kinds of things that can fall out from these issues can actually cause more damage than the initial event. So yeah, it's an interesting book, and also interesting fraud case there.
No, completely. Yeah, I come from a retail background as well, where generally buyers in a retail environment have very close relationship with the suppliers. And, historically, there was a lot of trust placed in them to actually maintain a above board relationship with those suppliers. And I think really the key comes down to, rather than trusting your buyers, rather than trusting your employees, is to trust your process and trust that you've set up a process. So again, you don't incentivize these people. You don't give them the opportunity to commit these types of fraud, and you will already see a significant reduction directly from that. Fantastic. So check fraud. This is interesting because this check fraud had essentially decreased very significantly, over the past couple of decades. But we've seen a very big rise over just the last 5 years. And this is when you tamper with physical checks. you're forging signatures from bank check stock, or editing the number or the payee on a check that's already been issued. Janelle, do you have an example that you'd like to share with us on check fraud?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a spin from that definition, but still meets the criteria. Small business owner had a very trusted bookkeeper for many, many years, very trusted in the community, actually did some type of financial work in the community as a side business. Everyone knew this individual. And so the owner had given her both the bill approval and entry and the payment and signature authority over the checks, and they hadn't moved to any type of electronics approval system. And so what the individual was doing is, it goes back to what you were saying, Helena. There was the fraud triangle. There was opportunity, and then the individual was in a position needing financial help. And so that became the perfect opportunity for her to mark things as paying payroll taxes, but instead of actually paying the employee's payroll taxes, she was handwriting the checks to vendors like her credit card or Verizon or whatever it may be. And so over years, this was happening. And so the IRS was starting to send in notices to the company owner saying, where are your payroll taxes? You owe us. And they couldn't understand it. And so after a further investigation, it found out that when they pulled up the copy of the bank statements with the checks on there, they finally connected that the checks were written to someone else, but coded in the financial software as the payroll tax payments. And so that obviously was significant for the small business owner. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars had been stolen over a few years. Ultimately, it became an FBI investigation. Ultimately, the person was prosecuted. But the key about this is there's two things, right? Helena, you mentioned about having cybersecurity insurance. Not every smaller business or client is going to be able to do that or think that they're at risk for that. But then the second thing that comes is once you've actually identified fraud's taken place, can you actually get the money back from that person that's done it? And that was the thing that it took a significant hit to that small business, to the family that, owned it, to the families that they employed. And it took them a while to dig out from that. So that was a huge one with a win, where years later I saw this individual at a wedding, and she said, we finally got justice, where they actually, and not everybody actually gets that justice in these fraud cases. No. So so that's a significant.
Yeah, imagine for every happy ending, there's a lot that aren't as good.
For sure. There's also the opportunity cost lost during that time where they're dedicating their time to dealing with the situation instead of chasing sales, right? So it has like an exponential negative impact on their business.
Absolutely.
And just on that, I've got another statistic here that in 2023, 65% of organizations reported check fraud activity. So, I mean, this is down from single-digit percentages in the early 2000s. So it's the rise over the last couple decades has been incredible with regards to check fraud.
Wow.
All right, wire transfer scam is a type of fraud in which criminals trick individuals or businesses into sending money via wire transfer or a fraudulent account. Janelle, I think you've got another example of this for us.
I do, and it covers a little of what Helena had mentioned in her example. It's part phishing, part wire transfer scam, but I was actually the victim of this at one point. So CFO of a large organization, and received a very early email from a significant person in our organization with the president copied. The emails were actually intact. They were those individuals' emails. It wasn't, when you click on it, it didn't look like a scam email, asking me for an immediate wire transfer for a government audit that we had to send over immediately, that the president is aware. And I got that, and it was very scary. I remember shaking because multiple reasons, right? Someone is asking me to immediately send for a government audit that we're in trouble for. So they used fear in this tactic. And then it was coming from actual emails. So now it's like, I recognize that something was wrong, But the person sending it to me, if this isn't real, that means that there's a hacker. So now we've got the risk of a security IT issue. We've got the risk of a wire transfer scam. Or am I at risk if I don't send this wire transfer scam, money, that there is an audit issue? There's like all these things that were happening in that moment that were so scary. And so 7 a.m., I am dialing the IT person, the CIO, I'm dialing the person that the email's coming from, like, what is happening? And ultimately, someone had hacked in to this individual's email address, knew who the president was by simple Google search, connected all the pieces, and asked for an immediate wire transfer with the ACH to respond to an audit, that there was an actual audit happening. It wasn't anything that there was like an audit. It was a normal routine audit, but because they had gone onto the individual's email, they knew the things that were taking place.
They just had all that background information at their fingertips, right?
Yes. And then Helena, just like yours, they were deleting the emails they were sending as they were sending them, and cleaning and backtracking behind themselves when they were doing it as well. So
it's getting incredibly complicated. It's I don't want to say it's impressive, but really it's going in that direction with what they're accomplishing. Okay, well, and the last one, because it kind of does relate to quite a few of the above we spoke about, and that's the account takeover fraud. That's a hack. That's when someone gains access to your accounts through hacking, or when your credentials are essentially compromised. So it does follow quite a few of the examples we brought. I mean, I just have an example from, it was just yesterday, where I received a message on my phone, on my WhatsApp, from someone. The name came through as the CEO of my organization, asking me to provide some some very specific information that we shouldn't be sharing with outside sources of the company. And well, fortunately, I am involved in financial controls and in general with safeguarding companies. So I didn't fall for this trick, but it was so well done. It had the professional picture of my CEO on the message, on the profile picture. Everything was just so incredibly realistic. So people are getting much, much better at performing these types of fraud. We're moving into some scary territory here. No, thank you so much for the examples, guys. We really do appreciate it. So we'll move on from here. So I'd like to ask the audience quickly, and you can take your time writing these down as we move through the presentation. But I would like to know, what types of fraud has your team encountered? And if you do provide examples, what we'll do, at least from an ApprovalMax perspective, is we'll get back to you on how these can be prevented in the future using the software, both from your GL system and through ApprovalMax's external financial control tools. So again, those are your billing schemes, reimbursement fraud, ACH fraud, phishing, kickback fraud, check fraud, wire transfer scams, and account takeovers. Feel free to share with any of your experiences with these types of fraud, and we will get back to you on exactly how you can safeguard from these in the future moving forward in 2025. So we're going to look at now detecting accounts payable fraud and what to look out for. So in general, you have your unusual suppliers and suppliers who use free email providers. These are going to be your more basic ones. From a finance perspective, you're going to look for excessive payments to a single supplier, incomplete or duplicate documentation, payments just below the approval limit, and then abnormally low or high supplier prices. Janelle, I believe you've got, you'd like to talk about excessive payments to a single supplier?
Yeah, I mean, just from a perspective of how do you catch it if it has taken place, right? So from that perspective, just setting up a regular cadence to review your financial reports or vendor reports that you may have, just really getting on a schedule of providing that oversight of your expenses, doing a variance analysis and see if there's any trends or anomalies that are sticking out. Maybe doing like a purchases by vendor and just seeing if there's any duplicate payments or anything that's like significant that may have slipped through a process or even a manual process. it just gives you an opportunity to investigate and take corrective action quickly versus having time go by. And so that's one recommendation. It's also useful to monitor payments that might have gone outside of an approval process. If you're using ApprovalMax and somebody has sent something through or wrote a check that hasn't gone through that process, it gives you an opportunity to provide oversight that way as well. So obviously I'm with Intuit, and so we have our own bill pay system within QuickBooks. And if you're using an electronic bill payment process too, and suspect something, at least then you have opportunity to get that care support. QuickBooks does offer that, where you can call and launch an investigation and get that assistance as well. And so if you're in a manual process and you move into a more electronic process, it just gives you an additional detection beyond just reviewing your financial statements.
Fantastic. Well, I guess that goes right into our next slide, and that's just tips on how to prevent accounts payable fraud. You did get into that, but is there anything else you'd like to share from a QuickBooks perspective on how we can also, any other ways that we can help prevent this type of fraud?
Yes. I mean, prevention is always better than detection, right? We much would rather be on the prevention side than dealing with all the examples that we just all gave, where we're saying, oh, we've caught it after the fact, and this is what we have to do with it from there. So from a prevention side, obviously ApprovalMax, and you'll talk about that in a little bit, with all the great things that ApprovalMax has to help do that prevention. But on the QuickBooks bill pay side, so once it's gone through that process, you can use that electronic bill payment integration. You can actually get connected to what we call our QuickBooks Business Network. And our QuickBooks Business Network is actually a secure way to connect your customers and vendors within QuickBooks. And so how this works is, when there is a new vendor that's been entered into ApprovalMax and ultimately pushed over to QuickBooks, if you're using our bill pay platform, QuickBooks will actually search our network and be able to connect to their payment information that they've had in their system. So it just adds this option and a layer of verification that you are securely paying someone. You don't have access to their information, but you know they're in the network. And so that's one way to really have a verification around the vendor you're paying. And then additionally, that another cool thing about our bill payment system is we have system security going on just behind the scenes, right? That is just our risk assessment that we do, offering the software, and it helps us to detect possible anomalies in your payment trends or your amounts. And the way I think of it is like, when, say, you live in Florida and you go on a trip to New York, and all of a sudden your bank's saying, alert, there's all these purchases in New York. Your bank is detecting that there's something weird about the way you're spending comparative to usual. And so that's similar to the QuickBooks bill pay. Is they have us checks and balances where they can monitor those bill payments, just to add that further layer of protection to the users. So those are a couple of really cool things with using that electronic bill pay system.
No, that's fantastic. So at ApprovalMax, we're payment service provider agnostic, and we've been incredibly impressed with the release of bill pay, of Intuit bill pay, and how it's actually been growing in the market. More and more of my both accounting and bookkeeping clients that I work with, but as well as direct finance teams, are coming to me with this option. And it's fantastic to see that you've got these features that are safeguarding your clients moving forward.
Thank you.
All right. What about Helena from, at Entreflow? What are the best practices you guys have that helps prevent accounts payable fraud?
For sure. Well, I think first and foremost, you need to have segregation of duties. So whether you've got systems in place or not, having the same person do too many steps within an AP process is just going to, again, just create that possibility for an opportunity if something happens, right? So having the same person entering the bills and managing the payments is not good. Without anybody else reviewing at some point in time. So the segregation of duties is great, is I think a necessary thing to have in place. And it can be tricky for smaller organizations. So I mean, we've had a lot of companies that have come to us, and either they've discovered there was fraud, or we discovered it while we were doing the onboarding. And then typically it was because, like your example, Janelle, with that one bookkeeper, where they're too small of a company to have too many people involved in the process, and the business owners is just too busy, right? And so they're putting a lot of risk out there for the sake of something that could potentially be very little amount of their time if they just had a good workflow in place. But nobody should be doing everything from start to finish from an AP process. So the segregation duty is really important, and then also consistent workflows. So for firm owners, I think it's important to have consistent workflows across all of your clients as much as possible. Every time you have an exception here, an exception there, it just creates more space for things to not go as planned, because now you have your team kind of doing different types of things with each of their clients. So we try to force all of our clients to use the same applications, for instance, and have the same workflows so that it's very consistent for us and repeatable and easy for us to monitor and track. So we don't let our clients decide that much when it comes to segregation of duties and the systems that we're using, because we're the experts in this. They're not experts in fintech. They're not experts in controls. And I know there's a lot of firm owners out there that just they're very people pleasing, and they want to make sure that the client is happy and make sure that they're happy with the process and let them decide. But I think as finance experts, we know better. 9.5 times out of 10, right? And so we don't give the clients the opportunity to have much say in those. So we take on the responsibility of financial controls, which means we're going to put the best financial controls in place, and we're going to put the best tech in place to make sure that we can manage those effectively. We also force our clients into better practices. So you might have great technology and great workflows, but then your client is kind of skirting around your workflows or kind of changing the rules or sending you emails for things when they're supposed to be sending it elsewhere or what have you. And so we're really strict on our clients that they have to follow our processes or they have to go away. And I think that's a really, really hard thing for firm owners to do and employees and their employees to do, because obviously they're your client. You want to make sure that you're not creating conflict and that everything's copacetic there. But sometimes the client is the problem, or some of their employees are the problem that are creating these holes in the workflow. And so we're really strict on them. And we have a lot of conversations at the start of our engagement about, this is the way we do things. We need you to do it this way. These are all the reasons. No exceptions, please. Or if there's a random exception, we all need to document it and make sure that we're all super clear about the risk. Because random things will come up here and there, like I mentioned with the wire transfers that we had to do to this one country. So that we're all clear about how we're going to manage that weird, unique situation. But we're really strict on our clients, because that's how I can protect my firm at the end of the day. I think of it from my own firm protection, which is really my team's protection too. I want to create a situation where my team is not put in a situation where they're taking on more risk than they want to, right? And then finally, having approvals for everything. So, just covering your bottom as much as possible, and ensuring that you've got documented approvals and not approvals in random. Okay, I got a text approval for one time and I got a Slack approval one time and an email approval, but just the approvals are consistent. They're in the right place consistently. And it's easy for, if something happened to that employee that was managing the payments and their approvals, if for some reason they were on vacation or, were out of the office and somebody else needed to figure out where's that approval, that we could go and find it. And so that's why we like, having ApprovalMax in place with our clients, because it's easy for everybody else to track. Okay, yes, that was approved. It was approved this date. Here's the audit history, yada, yada, rather than having it scattered all over the place. So it's, I guess those are my four top tips for making sure that you've got a good prevention in place. And like you said, Janelle, prevention is key. So being proactive is always a heck of a lot better than having to unravel a big mess afterwards.
That's absolutely true. No, thank you so much for that. And so, just a quick breakdown for ApprovalMax. We integrate with QuickBooks Online, Xero, and NetSuite. We've got tens of thousands of customers that use us as a financial control tool, and we've been a part of the QuickBooks Online ecosystem since 2017. Now, a lot of the trends of what we spoke about, a lot of I would say the patterns that are there is that financial controls, they're not something new, but what happens is, if you're doing them manually, they start to become tedious. People start to find loopholes of doing around them, or not necessarily loopholes, or just people start to find reasons to get around them. Like you said, someone's on vacation, let's get around it because we have to get this bill paid. We have to get this transaction processed. Let's skip the financial controls that are in place. A tool like ApprovalMax is set up in a way that it automates all parts of your financial controls so that they don't become tedious. You don't have these bottlenecks forming, and you don't give people the excuse to go around the financial controls. A lot of these tools, I'm going to note very specific ones here that really help prevent companies from committing specific types of fraud. Like we have our bill to PO matching, for example. So what our bill to PO matching does is it ensures that the amount that the supplier charged on the purchase order is the same amount that came through on the bill, and that when the product actually arrives, whether this is a construction company on site or a manufacturing company on the factory, when the supplies do arrive, it arrives at the appropriate quantity. And you've got this three-way checking mechanism that really helps close the process. We have our audit trails for every financial document that goes through. So you can quickly and easily go into QuickBooks Online and see who approved the document, when it was approved, and any comments and reasons why the approval took place. Our supplier approvals ensure that when a new supplier comes through or when a change to a supplier comes through, that those changes are approved by the right people. These are reducing your phishing attempts. These are reducing all the attempts that they can be available for fraud. And then, of course, we spoke about fraud, but we also spoke about, non-finance people just making mistakes. So with the automation that ApprovalMax in place, there are tools that stops these mistakes from happening. You're able to put finance people into the approval process just to ensure that all the checks are made and all the appropriate information is filled out. We have our duplicate detection to ensure that, the same bill is not added twice by different people in the same department because they're just trying to get their work done on a daily basis. There are careless mistakes and there are fraudulent mistakes, and ApprovalMax is a tool that is going to protect you from both. And then finally, and I think this is one of our coolest tools that we have, is yes, ApprovalMax is an accounts payable approval automation system. But even if changes are made to your bills after the approval system in QuickBooks Online, we will detect those changes and put them into our audit trail. So you know exactly what's going on even after the approval process. So just a quick plug in here for ApprovalMax. We do have a free 14-day trial that you can set up. You can connect your organization, no credit card required, connect to QuickBooks Online. And the best thing you can do is just set up a call with one of our account executives. That could be me, that could be someone on my team. And we'll walk you through all the steps it takes to set up ApprovalMax on your system. I often get the question asked, how long does the implementation take? Quoted often in days, weeks, maybe even a month. If we get on that call, I can have you set up with the right tools within 15 minutes time. It's incredibly simple. You will know all the effects of the process because, again, financial controls themselves, they aren't new, but it's the automation that's really providing the security through ApprovalMax. So I highly recommend get onto ApprovalMax.com, sign up for a free 14-day trial, get on a call with one of our account executives, and we can see if it makes sense for either your accounting and bookkeeping firm or for your internal finance department at the company that you're working at. We work with all types of businesses. We're fantastic with construction, real estate firms, all the way to research laboratories, manufacturing, and even mining and exploration companies have reached out to us for all types of tools. So we work with any type of business that wants to safeguard themselves or their clients from accounts payable fraud. I just want to scroll now, just see if we have any questions from the audience. Let me just have a quick look here on the right-hand side. So I think this goes to you, Janelle. Will QuickBooks bill payment system allow you to do everything that Bill.com offers? It's a very salesy question.
It is. And it's a pretty loaded question because it depends, right? It depends on exactly what it is that you need in order to execute. But generally speaking, right, if we're talking through ApprovalMax, we're going through all of the, you guys do all the user workflows and the approval processes. Once you get over to our side, like I said, we have the business network. You can pay via ACH. You can pay via faster payment options, whatever it may be. So I feel like from there, that whole package has you covered in order to do exactly what it is you're doing in Bill.com. But again, bit of a loaded question. It depends.
Yeah.
That's my accountant answer. That's what I like to use. But the goal would be that you'd be able to pay your bills faster and utilize our processes just the same.
Fantastic. I've got another question here. What industries benefit the most from ApprovalMax? Now, I did say it from my perspective, but maybe Helena from Entreflow, what types of industries do you really ensure that ApprovalMax is locked in, ready to go?
Certainly. So we have a lot of not-for-profits on ApprovalMax. They love it. They go absolutely crazy on the opposite end of the spectrum with the approvals, like $2 things, expenses getting approved sometimes. So they're great. A lot of construction needing approvals, especially because it's not necessarily that the spend needs to be approved, but the allocation of where that needs to go needs to get approved. It can be both, but that comes up quite a lot with construction. And then companies that have lots of projects, so they might have lots of teams in different places, expense reimbursements, where there's a little bit more complexity where, as the accounting team, we wouldn't necessarily know where things need to go because it could be that, somebody's in 3 different sites on many different projects in the same week. So that's some common industries for us, but there's also use cases that come up for sure.
It really is. And I mean, just on that as well, we do have some newly released features at ApprovalMax that also benefit these types of organizations. The one I would like to point out is our budget checking feature. Mm-hmm. And this is absolutely fantastic. And like you said, you don't know where these, exactly how your clients are operating with regards to their expenses specifically. So it's about giving them the tools to also monitor how they're processing their bills. And our budget checking feature will allow you to submit a bill and then compare that bill to the available budget. That could be depending on your category codes, but very specifically in your example, on projects that you have ongoing within an organization. This, again, is absolutely huge for both, as I mentioned, construction firms with multiple projects around the city, or again, multiple projects within a specific construction development process that they're going through as well. Another example, again, is I love to quote this, are just the research laboratories and how they've also got their specific projects that they work with, often multiple laboratories across a geographic area, and then knowing how much budget is left on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, and on an annual basis really makes this approval process a lot simpler for the people involved. And like I said, it's the financial controls have been there for forever, but it's about automating them and making them less tedious, making them easy to follow, just to ensure that they are followed moving forward for organizations. Thank you for that, Helena. We've got another question here. How does ApprovalMax differ from Bill.com? Very simply, so ApprovalMax, we're on the beginning side of the accounts payable process. So you can imagine if accounts payable is, has 3 sections. You've got your capturing of the invoice or the financial document on the one side, the approval of the financial document in the middle, and then finally the payment. So ApprovalMax is payment service provider agnostic. We'll capture the document using our capture technology, fill in all the details, automatically get it going through the approval process, and then send it into QuickBooks Online under the awaiting payment stage so that it can be taken over by your payment service provider.
Do you want me to speak to this question from C. Strick here about the vendors requiring payment by check? Because I've had this come up with a number of clients before where we had, when we started working with them, and they had very old school vendors who would only take payments by check. One of them was a retail grocery location. They're usually very old school, where when they do the deliveries, sometimes they were handwriting the invoice on a piece of paper to give the client, and they would write a check there and they do the swap, and things would go, missing. Obviously, paperwork disappears. Over the course of about a year, we were able to convert all of their vendors to payments through. Sorry, I mentioned Pluto previously. We don't have the bill payment option in Canada, the outgoing payments. We have the incoming payments. So we use an application called Pluto for our outgoing payments. And Bill.com doesn't work in Canada as well. So if anybody's wondering what I was talking about, I'm from Canada. We've got different apps. But in any case, we got that client onto Pluto, and all of his old school vendors were happy with it because they would get a notification. And this is the same with all payment process. You get a notification about the payment on the way, the money goes straight into their bank account. It was just an education piece that we had to go through. We had to get on the call with them, talk to them about it. We basically were able to sell them that they're going to get their money faster. And they were like, sign me up, I'm okay with this. Because some of them they were mailing checks to previously. And so, it would get delayed in the post, and then they might be held at the bank. They might hold their check for a week before the cash hits their bank account. So, and then through the process, because we needed to have a digital copy of the invoice, it forced them to actually start creating invoices properly and emailing them to us rather than just dropping them off and getting lost in the mix. So because we were able to speak to the pain points that they had with this manual system of delayed payments or invoices going missing or, blah, 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 over the course of the year, we were able to get everybody off of check payments, because we take a stance at Entreflow that we do not deal with checks at all. There's just so much check fraud. I just don't want to touch it. And so when we work with our clients, we say, that's fine. We'd love to work with you. We're cutting out checks, and we'll give them a bit of time to do that transition, because it's not like you can do it like cold turkey all the time. And we have never had any problems with our clients in all the years getting very old school companies, a lot of manufacturing, retail, they're addicted to checks, off of them. And once we get them off of them, then they're like, oh, we should have done this sooner. So there's a way. You just have to jump in and be the educator, reach out to everyone, talk them through it, and ensure that they're going to be okay.
And within ApprovalMax as well, we also have our standalone workflows, which can bridge that gap as you're changing your processes there. So before you actually get them into your electronic invoices, you can use your standalone workflows as well, just to ensure that processes are again being followed until you make the big change over on that side. We've also got a comment here from one of our viewers who says that they use Positive Pay through their bank, which also works great as a control for checks. Fantastic to see people helping each other within the community. Thank you so much for that comment. Okay, and I've got another question here. Is we use Deal for employee reimbursements. Can we connect Deal to ApprovalMax so that reimbursement requests flow through ApprovalMax? So we don't have, I mean, there is no direct integration with Deal, but we do have an open API that we could potentially use to get that set up. So what I do recommend is get in touch with our team, and then we can look into that over a Zoom call. We'll get one of our solutions engineers on the line, and we can see exactly what we can do for your reimbursement requests that are going through. But I am absolutely certain that we can definitely assist in that area. So that's a very nice question, and I look forward to hearing from you through our sales process in the near future. And let's see, I do think that covers all of our questions. I think that's everything. Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for all your comments. I'd like to a special thank you to Alina and Janelle for joining us and for helping facilitate this webinar. I think, you know, as scary as fraud may be, if you have the right processes in place, if you're doing the best for your company, for your clients, you are safeguarding yourself from this fraud. And like I said, it's not about trusting your employees. It's about trusting the processes that are in place. Helena, Janelle, any final comments from your side that you'd like to point out?
I don't have any questions, but it's just been a privilege to be on this webinar with both of you. So thank you so much.
Likewise, likewise. And I guess one other quick comment I'll make is I know it can be overwhelming for people when they think about, you know, putting new processes in place, putting new systems in place, educating their team. It can seem like a bit of a hurdle. We've demoed and implemented many apps over the years at Entreflow, and I can say it gets easier. So, you know, it's if you can, you know, we're at the start of the year here, so if you could put on your New Year's resolutions to work on your fraud prevention and your internal controls, and enroll your team to help you with actually implementing things. You don't have to do it all by yourself, and you don't have to know all the answers. You know, app partners like ApprovalMax and also, you know, Instructor are there to help us with these transitions too. So reach out to your account managers. They're there to help you to get over, you know, the initial learning for yourself, and enroll your team in this as well, because it's to protect them as much as it is to protect you and your company. you'll probably find that it's not going to feel like it's as big of a thing to implement as you'd initially thought. So I know it might sound like a lot sometimes, but honestly, once you get over that initial hump and you get the workflows in place, you'll find it saves your team so much time and it makes their lives a lot easier. It's really worth it, and the rewards are great. So yeah.
Thank you so much. No, fantastic closing remarks. I think we'll leave it at that. Jesse just had a question on CPE instructions. They'll play a video at the end, and the course will be emailed to you tomorrow. One more big thank you to both our panelists that have joined us and to all the viewers that came in to help Prevent Fraud in 2025. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the rest of your days. It was a pleasure having you here.
Today's event has ended. To earn CPE, go to earmark.app or scan the QR code on the screen. Then log in or create your free account. Search for the course by tapping on the magnifying glass icon on the home screen and then entering the name of this event. It takes a few days to make the course, so if you're attending this event live, keep an eye out for an email letting you know when the course is available. Pass the quiz to earn your CPE, then tap the button to email yourself a certificate. Stay tuned for more events from Earmark. Thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon.